This is the Dirshu Mishnah Brura as we continue. Siman Reish Mem Gimel. We divided the shir up into a separate shir on the Hakdama, in which the Mishnah Brura, in his eloquent fashion, and the Hakdama laid down the three types of arisa, three types of workers, or working arrangements with a guy. You have arisa, schiros, and kablanos. Arisas and schiros, we said Mikra Adin is mutter, but on a bathhouse, since a bathhouse is not generally rented for that, therefore there's a maris ayin. Kablanus is aser meikar adin, and then the Mishnah Brura mentioned the entity of havla, which would be the heter for schar Shabbos, that you're not allowed to gain money for working on Shabbos. Now we go into the Mechaber. Sif Aleph says the Mechaber, Lo yaschar adam merchat shaloi leini Yehudi. One is not allowed to rent his bathhouse to a guy. Neshanikra al Shemai, as Mishnah Brura was makdim. The problem is everyone knows that this bathhouse belongs to a Yid. And therefore, there's the maris ayin that you hired the guy to work for you, and therefore it's aser. And that's where the maris ayin comes from. That is tam merchatz is not generally, or their general arrangement is not arisos, is not, let's remind yourself, arisos is that the guy gets a profit, the guy gets a share of all the revenue. Says the Mechaber, that's not the normal arrangement on arisos. Pirush, arasu ha'oived lokach chelek mimash yeshbiach levailov, that the worker gets a portion of it. That's not the way the Asam Bathhouse is. Va'amri shekol ha'revach shel Yisrael. V'sachar is ein Yehudi b'kach, and the maris ayin is that people are going to say that they hired the guy b'kach l'kach l'yayim. V'nimsa shein Yehudi oisem lacha b'shlichus shel Yisrael. Therefore, a merchatz is also not midina, but a maris ayin, because it's not normally done be'arisos. Continues the Mechaber on the flip side. The contrast is Aval Sadeh is going to be mutter. Why? It is normal to create an arisos, a profit, a margin that the guy gains for all the work that he does. Everyone knows that it belongs to Yid the field. Still, and he's working for himself. Why? Because the more he makes, the more he gets. V'tanur, and an oven is dinoi kemerchatz. V'rechayim, and a mill is dinoi kesadeh, is like a field. Says the Ramah, afal pi shalalacha Yehudi rak l'shisha ravia. He's only getting a percentage, and it might be a small percentage. V'ishli Yisrael hana, and the Yid is gaining sheinu da'ivin b'Shabbos, because you're gaining. Still, it is shari. Why? The critical words of the Ramah, quoting a Beis Yosef, etc. Te'ena Yehudi adaita dinavshei Ovid. He's working for himself, as he himself has an incredible benefit. He gets a third, a quarter, etc. of the profits. Says the Mishnah Brura, Merchat Shaloi, explains the Mishnah Brura. What does it mean, Shaloi? Bein b'shano ba'atzmai, whether you built it himself, or if you look kind of yashabai b'nikar shem alav, or even if he purchased it, but everyone knows it's his. Leini Yehudis have cut the base. Koshkin the Yisrael mummer. To Iverm Nami Mishal of the Iver Loisiti Michel, you have a different problem of lifting the Iver. The times that Shayach Af Sadeh B'chol Davar, that applies everywhere. You can never have a Yid working for you because of lifting the Iver. Neshanikra al Shemai Sivkat and Gimel Pirush. What's the Marasayin? Says the Mishnah Brura Sivkat and Gimel the Medina Shari Laschir Lein Yudi L'Shana L'Chaydesh. Medina, you're allowed to rent it to a guy for a month or a year. Shitin L'Kach V'Kach. Bein Yasik Bein Yudi Bein Lo Yasik Kenu. And the guy gets all the profits. Why? As we've learned, it's rented for a year. It's not rented just for Shabbos. Therefore, there's no problem of Schar Shabbos because there's Havlah. It's being subsumed, all the payments together. Why? Because he's working for himself. As the Ramah pointed out, even if the guy only gets a percentage, he's working for himself. Even though you have all the reasons to be makel, when it comes to a bathhouse, we have a Maris Ayin issue. Shenikra al Shemai Shel Yisrael, because everyone knows this bathhouse is his. V'yoimru, what are people going to say? Abriyos. The Schir Yoim Oishluchahu, that he hired this guy. V'dav, k'kshem aschir l'shana l'chaydesh. Aval aschir le'ni yudi liyamim. But if you hired a guy out per day, every day that he works, he gets a certain amount. After comes out, he's working for himself. But because it's per day, and now it's not only a marasayin. In that case, we call Makkah Medina to Aser. Because the Yid is then gaining per day of the guy working for him on Shabbos. The davar azim narasayin in Aser ela b'tei chatcham shall each of Yisrael, an important ingredient in marasayin. It's only within the tchum. Why? Because that's where Yidden will see him what he's doing, and that's where the marasayin is applicable. To stop merchat sevkat and dalad pirish because of Allah and the Sadeh motel aschira mitam zeh shidla ba'arisas, that a field that you're allowed to rent out because everyone's going to think it's arisas. When it comes to merchats, we don't have this reason. Why? Because it's not the derech of a merchatz to give it with arisas. People aren't going to think that it was rented. It's lo shriach, because that's like common by a merchatz. The Amiru Leini Udi Shvos, Mishnah Berurah starts over here. Should probably count all the different times. The Mishnah Berurah reminds us that talking to a guy, having him do malacha for you on Shabbos is an Issa D'Rabbanan. Now the Mishnah Berurah over here starts off and he even gives us the severity. Vasbechu Akra, and it comes from a pasuk that what dechol melacha lo yasu bahem. And the Mishnah Berurah explains, what do we learn after this pasuk? L'rameis, this teaches that your work should not be done by someone else. One has to protest. That's all when it comes to a merchatz. However, when it comes to a sadeh, if Katan Vav says Mishnah Berurah, sadeh is mutter. Set amount. Everyone knows that it belongs to a Yid. So how is it mutter? A very important rule says the Mishnah Berurah, it's mechuber. It's connected to the ground. Anything connected to the ground, it belongs to the ground. It belongs to the bailam. It's not normal to rent it still. Why? Because we're not going to suspect him that he rented him per day. Because the derech is to rent it barisas. Once it's the derech, which the Bir Allah over here is a meirich to prove that has to be the derech roiv anshe oise amakayim, then we go with the roiv. Arisa shari deitin avshei avid going b'haga. V'tanur, what about an oven? Sekund zayin lasker tanur lava is by to rent an oven to bake in it. Dina is kemerchaz tananami derech lasker lino barisos. And an oven is not the derech to rent it and to say it's arisos. It's the same din as arisos. Very chayim, so we've got the ches. The darka lino barisas k'may sadeh, or rechayim is like a sadeh. And again, really, for these two Mishnah Berurahs, we just see that not every item is the way that it is. It goes by the rives. Mishnah Berurah is telling you in his time when they rented out a tanner, they rented a rechayim, what the mitzias is. But now we're going to have to translate this in to nowadays. What is the norm to rent out, to hire a worker to do A, to do B, to do C? Is it arisas? Is it schiras? Is it going to be Aser Medina? Will be a marasayin, etc. Will it fik la schira nami motikil el? Vayin baran demasha demein derech anshe usamakab. Litin rechayim barisas dinik my merchas also then to go to be like a merchas will be an Iser Medina. And here's the line. Tebe'emeh says the Mishnah Berurah on the final line. Talui b'cholelu adar lefi minhag haMedina bein lahachel bein lahachler ulkamei b'sif beis. As we're going to see in Mirz Hashem in Sif Beis. We'll stop over here and we will Mirz Hashem delve into some of the Dirshu notes as well as Sif Beis in the next year in Mirz Hashem.